Comparison is one of the most powerful yet destructive habits we fall into as human beings. It begins subtly, often without us realizing it. We scroll through social media, see someone's promotion, their new car, their vacation, and suddenly we feel behind. We measure our worth by the highlights of someone else's story, forgetting that what we're seeing is a carefully curated snapshot, not the full picture. This quiet act of comparison begins to whisper lies that we're not enough, not doing enough, not achieving enough. And before long, we start living not for ourselves, but for the approval of others. When you constantly compare, you shift your focus from progress to performance. Every move becomes about proving something, proving you're capable, worthy, or successful. But comparison traps you in an endless loop of validation where satisfaction never lasts. Even when you achieve something great, the joy fades quickly because someone else always seems to be doing it bigger, faster, or better. That's the poison of comparison. It makes your best feel small, even when it's extraordinary. The truth is, comparison blinds you to your own journey. You stop seeing the steps you've taken, the obstacles you've overcome, the lessons you've learned. You stop recognizing your own growth because you're too busy looking sideways instead of forward. Every person is on a different timeline with different challenges, opportunities, and definitions of success. Comparing your chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 10 is not only unfair, it's self-sabotage. When you let go of comparison, you free yourself from a weight you were never meant to carry. You begin to see your own progress clearly, not through the lens of others' achievements, but through the lens of your own purpose. You start to value consistency over competition, growth over gratification. It's in this space that true confidence begins to build, because confidence doesn't come from being the best. It comes from being your best. Focusing on yourself means directing your energy where it can actually make a difference. You can't change what others do, how others think, or what others achieve. But you can change your habits, your effort, your mindset. You can choose to invest in your own skills, nurture your own goals, and take control of your own growth. This shift in focus transforms your energy from envy into empowerment. When you're focused on yourself, your goals become clearer. You stop chasing trends or mimicking what seems to work for others. Instead, you start listening to your own voice, trusting your intuition, and aligning your actions with your values. That's where authenticity is born, when you stop performing for the world and start living for your purpose. Authenticity is magnetic, not because it seeks attention, but because it radiates truth. Comparison also drains creativity. When your attention is fixed on others, you end up copying rather than creating. You try to fit into molds that were never designed for you, and your uniqueness gets buried under imitation. But when you turn inward and focus on your own growth, your ideas flourish. You begin to create work, impact, and meaning that no one else can replicate because it's drawn from your personal journey, your struggles, and your vision. It's important to understand that this is not about ignoring others or living in isolation. It's about understanding that your greatest competition isn't out there, it's within. It's between your potential and your comfort zone, between who you are and who you could become. When you compete with yourself, progress becomes personal. Each day is a new chance to do a little better, to learn a little more, to move a little further than yesterday. The people who truly succeed are not obsessed with comparison. They are obsessed with growth. They don't need to prove themselves to anyone because their focus is on becoming the best version of who they can be. They use others' success as inspiration, not as a measure of failure. They celebrate others without losing sight of their own path. That is the mindset of growth, the ability to see abundance rather than competition. In the end, comparison offers nothing but distraction, while self-focus offers direction. The more you look outward for validation, the more you lose touch with your own purpose. But when you turn your attention inward, you regain control of your life, your time, and your energy. You begin to understand that fulfillment doesn't come from being ahead of others, but from being aligned with yourself. Control is one of the most misunderstood concepts in life. People spend so much time trying to influence what others think, how others act, or what others achieve, forgetting that the only thing truly within their control is themselves. You can't dictate someone else's success or happiness, but you have complete authority over your own effort, mindset, and choices. Yet, we often surrender that control by allowing external opinions and circumstances to dictate our emotions. The moment you start worrying about things outside your influence, you give away your power. When you focus on controlling yourself instead of others, you begin to operate from a place of strength rather than insecurity. You no longer react to every situation impulsively, nor do you let the opinions of others steer your direction. You start to realize that control doesn't mean forcing outcomes. It means mastering your response to them. You might not be able to decide what life throws at you, but you can decide how you interpret and respond to it. That's where personal power truly lives, in your ability to choose your attitude when everything else is uncertain. Every day, you're faced with situations that test your patience, your beliefs, and your focus. It's easy to blame others when things don't go your way, your boss, your parents, the system, the competition. But that blame shifts responsibility away from where it belongs. The truth is, you can't grow if you're constantly pointing outward. Growth happens when you turn inward and ask, what can I do differently? What's within my power to change right now? That question alone can completely transform the way you approach challenges. When you focus on what you can control, you stop wasting energy on things you can't. Think about how much time people spend worrying about being liked, envying others' achievements, or trying to change someone's behavior. None of that creates progress. But when that same energy is redirected toward improving your skills, developing discipline, and building resilience, your life begins to shift. Small actions compounded with consistency can accomplish more than a lifetime spent in comparison or complaint. The discipline to focus on yourself also builds emotional intelligence. Instead of being tossed around by every disappointment or setback, you learn to pause, reflect, and respond with clarity. You start understanding that peace is not the absence of problems, but the presence of self-control. It's being able to stay grounded when life gets unpredictable. It's recognizing that you can't calm the storm, but you can calm yourself. And in doing so, the storm begins to lose its power over you. There's incredible freedom in realizing that you are responsible for your own happiness. It removes the need for validation because you're no longer waiting for someone else to make you feel fulfilled. Happiness becomes an inside job, built through gratitude, self-awareness, and purpose. When you understand that, you stop chasing approval. You stop trying to meet expectations that were never yours to begin with. You find satisfaction in progress rather than in praise. Mastering yourself also means accepting that growth takes time. You can't rush development or demand instant results. Just as a seed takes time to grow beneath the soil before it breaks the surface, your growth often happens quietly, internally, away from recognition. The process requires patience and persistence. You learn to trust that your effort is never wasted, even when you don't see immediate outcomes. Control, in this sense, means staying committed to your path, even when the results haven't appeared yet. One of the greatest indicators of self-control is the ability to stay focused in a distracted world. Every notification, every opinion, every piece of news pulls your attention in 100 directions. But those who understand control know how to protect their focus. They choose their priorities carefully and align their actions with what truly matters. They don't chase everything. They commit to something. And in that commitment, they find clarity. Self-control doesn't make you rigid. It makes you resilient. It gives you the strength to adapt without losing your center, to bend without breaking. It teaches you that discipline is not punishment. It's a form of self-respect. When you hold yourself accountable, you stop waiting for motivation to appear. You move forward because you've built the habit of doing so, even when it's difficult. That's how real progress is made, not through bursts of inspiration, but through consistent, controlled effort. Ultimately, controlling yourself is an act of empowerment. It's about reclaiming your time, your focus, and your direction. You become less reactive and more intentional. You start making decisions based on your values rather than your fears. The world doesn't suddenly get easier, but you become stronger within it. And that strength allows you to move through life with a quiet confidence, knowing that while you can't control everything, you can always control how you show up. Success is one of the most personal concepts in the world, yet we often allow society to define it for us. From a young age, we are taught to measure success by external standards, grades, titles, money, and status. These things become our scoreboard, and we spend years trying to collect points in a game that might not even align with who we truly are. The danger in this is that we start chasing a version of success that doesn't belong to us. We lose sight of what actually makes us fulfilled because we're too busy trying to meet someone else's definition of achievement. When you realize that success is self-defined, you start to see life through a completely different lens. You stop asking, what do others expect from me? And begin asking, what do I expect from myself? That question shifts everything. It removes the need for validation because you're no longer playing for applause. You're playing for purpose. You begin to understand that real success is not about being better than others. It's about being true to yourself, even when that means taking a different path. The most successful people are rarely those who simply follow the rules laid out for them. They're the ones who take the time to understand their values, their strengths, and their passions, then build their life around those things. They define success not by how much they accumulate, but by how aligned their actions are with what truly matters to them. When your goals match your values, you no longer feel the need to prove your worth. You simply live it. Defining success for yourself also means accepting that it will look different for everyone. For some, success might mean financial independence. For others, it's freedom of time, deep relationships, or inner peace. There is no universal template, and that's what makes it so meaningful. The moment you let go of comparison, you give yourself permission to design a life that fits you, not one that impresses others. When you choose your own definition, you create space for authenticity to thrive. It's easy to believe that success comes with recognition, but some of the most fulfilled people live quietly, without applause. They're the ones who show up every day to do what they love, not because the world is watching, but because it gives their life purpose. They may not have the loudest voices, but they have the deepest roots. Their satisfaction doesn't come from others noticing their achievements. It comes from knowing they are walking their own path with integrity. When you define success for yourself, failure also takes on a new meaning. It stops being something to fear and becomes part of the process. You begin to see setbacks as lessons rather than losses. Every mistake becomes a stepping stone toward your version of success. You realize that growth is not always visible from the outside. It often happens in the quiet moments of perseverance when no one is watching. Defining success on your own terms gives you the patience to embrace that journey. Many people spend their lives climbing a ladder only to find it's leaning against the wrong wall. They reach the top and feel empty because what they've achieved doesn't bring them fulfillment. That's what happens when success is borrowed instead of built. But when you set your own definition, you ensure that every step you take leads towards something meaningful. You may not climb as fast as others, but every move you make will be intentional, and that makes the climb worthwhile. Self-defined success also invites balance. It reminds you that ambition doesn't have to come at the cost of well-being. You can be driven and still at peace, productive yet grounded. When success is aligned with your personal values, it doesn't drain you, it energizes you. You wake up each day with a sense of direction that feels natural instead of forced, because it's rooted in who you are, not who you're trying to impress. Defining success for yourself requires courage, because it means stepping away from what's popular and trusting what feels right. It means saying no to paths that look good on paper, but don't feel true in your heart. It's not always easy to swim against the current of expectation, but doing so leads to a life of authenticity. When you stop letting others decide what your success should look like, you start to experience freedom. Not the kind that's given to you, but the kind you create for yourself. When success becomes personal, every small victory feels significant because it represents progress toward your own vision. You stop rushing toward milestones that mean nothing to you and start appreciating the process of growth. You realize that success isn't a destination you reach. It's a reflection of how intentionally you live each day. The more you align your actions with your purpose, the more fulfilled you become, not because the world says you've made it, but because you know deep down that you are living life on your own terms. When you stop competing with others and start focusing on yourself, something profound begins to shift within you. Your energy, which was once scattered in comparison and competition, starts to consolidate into creation. The need to prove yourself fades, replaced by the desire to express yourself. You stop chasing what everyone else is doing and begin listening to your own rhythm. This is where creativity begins to flourish, when your focus turns inward and your motivation comes from authenticity rather than approval. Competition creates tension, and that tension often limits innovation. When your mind is consumed with outperforming others, you rarely explore your full potential because you're working within boundaries set by someone else's success. You follow trends, mimic methods, and play safe to stay relevant. But creation requires freedom, and freedom can only exist when you are not bound by comparison. When you focus on yourself, you give your mind permission to wander, to imagine, to build something entirely new rather than repeat what's already been done. The most original ideas often come from moments of stillness, when you're not trying to impress, but to understand. By focusing on yourself, you start to hear your inner voice, the quiet guidance that often gets drowned out by noise and distraction. That voice reminds you of what excites you, what challenges you, and what you truly care about. It helps you find purpose in your actions, and from that purpose, creativity flows naturally. Innovation isn't born from competition, it's born from curiosity. And curiosity can only exist when you give yourself space to explore without judgment. When you stop worrying about what others are achieving, you begin to measure progress differently. You stop asking, am I doing better than them? And start asking, am I doing better than I did yesterday? That shift creates an environment of growth instead of stress. You start setting goals that align with your values rather than trends. And as your focus becomes more personal, the results you produce start to reflect who you really are, not who you think you should be. That authenticity is what makes your work meaningful. Creativity thrives on confidence, and confidence grows when you trust your own process. When you focus too much on others, you begin to doubt your instincts, questioning whether your ideas are good enough. But when your attention is on your own journey, you start to recognize your strengths and refine them through practice. You no longer need to seek permission to create or approval to continue. You work because you believe in what you're building, not because you need validation for doing it. That mindset breeds innovation and originality. Focusing on yourself also allows you to connect more deeply with your work. Instead of rushing through tasks to meet external expectations, you invest time and care into what you do. You become more deliberate, more thoughtful, more present. This level of engagement transforms your effort into artistry. It's no longer about output, it's about expression. And in that space, creativity becomes limitless because you're not afraid to take risks, to fail, to experiment. You're too focused on evolving to worry about perfection. When you focus on others, your creativity often becomes reactive. You respond to trends rather than initiate them, and your ideas lose their originality because they're shaped by external influence. But when you focus inward, your creativity becomes proactive. You're not trying to outdo anyone, you're trying to explore something new. That's how true innovation happens, when your motivation comes from curiosity and growth rather than fear or comparison. Another powerful thing that happens when you focus on yourself is that your passion becomes sustainable. Competing with others can push you for a while, but it also burns you out. The pressure to keep up never ends because there will always be someone ahead. But when your drive comes from within, your motivation becomes steady and enduring. You don't lose energy chasing others because your energy is invested in creation, not competition. Your progress becomes deeply fulfilling because it's yours alone. The more you focus on your own growth, the more you inspire others to do the same. People begin to see in you what they wish to see in themselves: clarity, purpose, peace. Without even trying, you become an example of what it looks like to live authentically. Creativity has that ripple effect. When one person chooses to create instead of compete, it gives others permission to do the same. You start to build a culture not of rivalry, but of inspiration, where everyone's individuality adds to the collective progress. When you stop competing and start creating, you discover that fulfillment doesn't come from recognition. It comes from contribution. You begin to realize that your best work is not produced when you're trying to win, but when you're trying to express something real. By focusing on yourself, you stop trying to outperform others and start trying to outgrow yourself. And that's when your creativity truly begins to soar, not because you're chasing success, but because you found freedom in your own expression. Every person's journey is unique, shaped by experiences, choices, and circumstances that no one else can fully understand. Yet, it's easy to forget this truth when we constantly compare our progress to others. We see someone achieving milestones faster than us and start to feel inadequate as though we're falling behind. But life is not a race with a single track. It's a collection of individual paths, each winding in its own way. What looks like success for one person may not hold the same meaning for another, and what seems like delay in your journey might actually be preparation for something greater. Everyone's timeline is different. Some people find their purpose early, while others spend years exploring before they discover what truly drives them. Some build their dreams quietly over time, while others achieve visible success overnight. But both paths are valid. The danger lies in believing that there's a universal schedule everyone must follow. That belief breeds anxiety and dissatisfaction, as though you're running late in a race that doesn't even exist. Growth happens at its own pace, and trying to rush it only robs you of the lessons meant to strengthen you along the way. When you compare your path to someone else's, you overlook the struggles they face to get there. What you see as instant success often hides years of work, sacrifice, and failure. Social media and public achievements rarely show the full story. They're a glimpse of results, not the process behind them. Focusing too much on what others have achieved can blind you to your own progress. You might start to dismiss your small victories, forgetting that every step forward, no matter how small, contributes to your larger growth. Your journey is meant to be personal. The experiences you've had, the challenges you've faced, and the lessons you've learned all exist for a reason. They're shaping you into the person you're becoming. When you compare your story to someone else's, you risk missing the unique purpose behind your own path. The detours, the delays, and even the disappointments often serve as redirections towards something more fitting for you. What feels like failure in the moment might be the very thing that positions you for success later. It's important to trust that where you are right now is exactly where you need to be. That doesn't mean you should stop striving for more, but it means accepting that your progress is unfolding in its own time. Every experience, whether joyful or painful, is a part of your development. Comparison distorts this truth because it convinces you that growth should look a certain way or happen within a certain time frame. But genuine growth is unpredictable. It requires patience, persistence, and faith in your own process. When you focus on your own journey, you begin to notice progress that once went unseen. You realize that success isn't a single event, but a series of consistent efforts that build upon one another. You start to appreciate the smaller wins, the quiet improvements, and the internal transformations that others can't see. The more you focus on your personal path, the more grounded you become, because your happiness no longer depends on how far ahead or behind others seem to be. You find fulfillment in movement, not comparison. Everyone's life is guided by different circumstances, different families, opportunities, strengths, and challenges. Comparing your path to someone else's ignores those differences. It's like comparing two books without realizing they belong to entirely different genres. Each person's story has its own rhythm, its own turning points, and its own lessons. What works for someone else may not work for you, and what feels slow for you might actually be exactly the pace that ensures you learn what you need before moving forward. When you understand that everyone's path is different, you start to feel less pressure to conform. You stop rushing to meet deadlines that were never yours to begin with. You learn to listen to your own intuition and trust your instincts, even when others don't understand them. You start making choices that align with your values instead of chasing trends or expectations. That alignment brings peace because you're no longer living for approval. You're living for authenticity. The beauty of embracing your unique journey is that it allows you to fully experience it. Instead of constantly wishing you were somewhere else, you begin to find meaning in the moment you're in. You learn to appreciate both the progress and the pauses, recognizing that even waiting can be part of growth. Every season of life serves a purpose, and each phase prepares you for what comes next. Comparing your timeline to others only steals your ability to enjoy your own. Your journey isn't supposed to look like anyone else's because your purpose isn't the same as anyone else's. You were never meant to walk someone else's path. You were meant to create your own. The differences between your life and another's aren't flaws. They're proof of individuality. When you embrace that truth, you free yourself from the need to measure up, and instead, you learn to move forward with patience, confidence, and faith in your own direction. The greatest competition you will ever face is not with another person, but with the person you were yesterday. This perspective changes everything. When you stop measuring your worth against others and begin to measure it against your own growth, you create a standard that is both challenging and empowering. Competing with yourself means constantly striving to evolve, to learn, to improve. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Every step forward, no matter how small, is a victory because it brings you closer to becoming who you're capable of being. When you focus on self-improvement, the noise of comparison begins to fade. You stop worrying about who is ahead or behind, and instead, you start to see life as a personal journey of growth. Each day becomes an opportunity to do something better than you did the day before, to respond with more patience, to work with more focus, to live with more intention. This mindset keeps you grounded in reality because it doesn't rely on external validation. You don't need anyone else's success or failure to define your own worth. Self-improvement also requires humility. It demands that you look at yourself honestly and acknowledge both your strengths and your weaknesses. It means admitting that you have room to grow and being willing to put in the effort to change. Growth is never comfortable. It stretches you, challenges you, and sometimes exposes the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. But this discomfort is the birthplace of progress. The more willing you are to confront your flaws, the stronger and more capable you become. Every small improvement compounds over time. When you dedicate yourself to getting just a little bit better each day, the results become visible in ways you can't always predict. It's like watering a plant. At first, you might not see much happening, but underneath the surface, roots are growing stronger. Eventually, that unseen growth becomes visible, and the transformation is undeniable. Self-improvement works the same way. The small, consistent efforts you make today create the foundation for future breakthroughs. Competing with yourself also frees you from the exhausting need to control external circumstances. You can't dictate how others perform or how quickly they achieve their goals, but you can control your own effort and mindset. That realization brings peace. It allows you to focus on what's within your reach instead of being distracted by things you can't change. Progress becomes more consistent because your energy is directed inward where it can actually make a difference. The journey of self-improvement is deeply personal, but it also has a ripple effect. When you commit to becoming better, you naturally start to influence the people around you. Your discipline inspires others. Your progress encourages others to grow without trying to compete or compare. You become a source of quiet motivation simply by showing what's possible when you focus on your own path. True leadership often begins this way, not through dominance, but through example. Improving yourself doesn't mean constantly chasing more, it means learning how to grow with balance. It's about refining your mindset, not overwhelming yourself with impossible standards. Some days, growth looks like pushing your limits. Other days, it's resting, reflecting, and recharging. The key is consistency, the willingness to keep showing up even when progress feels slow. Over time, this consistency builds character, resilience, and self-respect. You begin to trust yourself more because you know you're putting in the work. When you treat yourself as your own competition, you start to celebrate personal milestones that might otherwise go unnoticed. You recognize your own development, the moments when you handled something better than you once would have, when you stayed calm instead of reacting, when you took initiative instead of waiting. These victories might not earn applause, but they represent genuine transformation. And that kind of growth is worth far more than any external recognition. This mindset also builds patience. You begin to understand that real growth is not linear. It happens in phases with periods of progress and plateaus. There will be times when it feels like you're not moving forward, but even in those moments, learning is taking place. The key is to stay committed, to trust the process even when results aren't immediate. Self-improvement is not about racing to a finish line, it's about creating a lifetime habit of learning and evolving. As you continue to compete with who you were yesterday, you start to realize that the true reward isn't reaching perfection, but discovering your potential. Every day becomes an opportunity to rewrite your story, to take another step toward the person you want to become. The more you focus on progress over comparison, the more fulfilled you feel. Not because everything is perfect, but because you know you're growing, and that growth itself is a form of success.